Hi, welcome to Ongoing Administration for the Unitrends System Administration course. By the end of this module, you'll be able to list the tasks administrators do to maintain their systems over time. You'll also be able to run and view reports, logs, and manage alerts to monitor the backup and recovery process. You'll also be able to manage and balance backup retention and backup performance goals. First, let's take a look at monitoring alerts, reports, and logs. Alerts and reports provide insight into system activity. When we first start to focus on the alert side, alerts can be set up to identify problem areas like hardware failures, connection issues, minimum retention, and failed backups. They're also visible from the dashboard and via the alert report. We're going to show you a little bit of that in a demo. When you configure alerts, you want to make sure you follow up on any alert that you see in your dashboard. We've been telling you that in almost every module you've viewed. When we look at the report side, they provide insight into critical information about the health of your system. It helps you identify problems or spots and concern areas that might require investigation. They also can be exported. There are some exceptions there, a few of them can't be, but the vast majority can be exported for you to keep long-term historical data on. You're going to review your reports daily, and you're going to look at trends and exceptions. What stands out to you when you look at these reports? We're going to try to show you some of that insight today. Let's take a quick look at balancing storage, retention, and backup performance. When you look at monitoring your storage and retention, the system is really designed to manage the storage space using retention policies and purging rules. As long as you configure those retention settings. By default, they're not set. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. Now, the system's also designed to alert you if you have issues, as long as you once again configure your email recipients and your SMTP server settings. What you really want to look out for when you're monitoring your systems and you're looking at storage and retention, you want to monitor really your daily growth and data reduction via the dashboard. We're going to go over the dashboard here. We're going to talk about the dashboard, the capacity report, the storage report, and the data reduction report. These are probably the four really critical reports that help you monitor your storage and retention. When we first start to take a look at setting up retention-related alerts for things like new servers, applications, or drives, unexpected growth over time, those alerts can be set up to help you discover anything like that. Another real big key is don't ignore capacity or storage or retention alerts. Make sure you take action on those types of alerts as soon as possible to make sure they get resolved. It can affect your retention, it can affect your appliance, and the ability to do future backups. If excessive growth and hardware change alerts are not managed in a timely manner, you may risk failed backups due to space issues. If there's no room left or any landing zone, no room to bring on new backups, they will fail. If free space retention is down, you may only keep 7 days and everything else is purged. You may want to keep 14, 25, 30, 45 days, but if you run and grow your capacity, it can purge everything down and start keeping probably less than a week. If you ignore these alerts, you can really end up with no available space. You're going to use all your used, and you're going to have no free space to bring on new backups, causing, once again, backups to fail. Let's take a look at a few ways you can manage your retention. You want to make sure you review your incremental backups to avoid servers with a really extreme high rate of change of new growth. If your end users are out there saving new files constantly to a server and that thing just grows huge all the time, you want to make sure if you're running incremental backups against it, make sure you're paying attention to that one server with that really extreme high rate of growth, of new growth. We're not talking about changes, somebody going out and changing that same file over and over and over again. We're talking about they're adding new files constantly to a new server at an extreme high rate. You want to make sure if you have no backup copy jobs created, you're not going to see any synthetic differentials in there. Right? Because assets with a backup copy job, every night it builds that synthetic differential, gathering up all those changes through those incrementals throughout that day. You want to make sure you double check what you're backing up to make sure it's what you want and what you need. Revisit your includes and exclude lists as you change and modify your servers. You want to make sure you're keeping up to date with what you are backing up. Don't just set it and forget it. You want to make sure you revisit your assets and archive old data off. You want to housekeep your servers. Unitrends will keep backing up all the junk that's on your servers, and if you don't trim them, you don't keep them ready for DR, you're not just keeping their production data on them, it can get out of control on you. You also want to make sure you identify anything that can be decommissioned. You run a retention report and find if it's in any schedules, you clear them out of the schedules, you manually purge all the backups and disable the schedule. By deleting the asset out of the system, it will automatically delete all the backups for that old asset. You no longer need to back it up. You no longer need to recover it. If you need to bring it back, you're probably going to go back to a cold backup copy sitting off-site from months or years ago. It's not a current production server anymore. No sense in having it in the backup system taking up that backup storage. By removing that old server out, you can get more retention for new servers or your existing production servers. Now, retention settings allow users to decide how long the backups are going to be kept on an appliance before they're purged off. And also, we track the backup chains as groups that are contained in that master or full and all the dependent backups that rely on that master or full. Now, they can be set for groups or individual object level. Right, so you can set it for the agent-based assets, the virtual machines, and down into each one of the database object assets as well, too. Now, retention settings help control the order in which backups are removed. It allows for more effective management of available space, and it controls how the synthetic full is created as well, too. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Now, your retention settings need to be set and monitored and adjusted over time. When we take a look at the max retention days limit first, that's the groups purged if they contain a master or full older than that limit. So if I set my max for 45 days, my master becomes older than 45 days, any dependent backups on that master are purged along with that master. That's why your limit can go lower once in a while than what you set. When we look at min retention days, that's our minimum goal, this is when the system will send you that alert. If your retention goes below your minimum, you'll get that email alert and the alert in the dashboard. Now, our min and max is default at 0 for all objects on a brand new installation, which means that you will not receive any email notifications until you set your max and minimum goals. Now, what I tell people when you talk about setting retention on a new installation, you really want to wait about 30 to 45 days before you set this retention. You don't want to be getting email alerts for the first 30 days of your installation until you meet those retention goals. Once you have 30 to 45 days worth of retention on the box, then you can start setting your minimum goals to 20, 30, 45 days so you don't get those alerts. You'll get them if you go below now, but you're not going to get them for 30 to 45 days until you meet your goal. You want to make sure you review your footprint for each asset and decide on retention for each of those assets individually, and make sure you set goals for all of those objects. When you start to set your retention, don't leave anything at 0 unless you're not really backing it up. If you have a backup schedule set against it, a backup job set against it, make sure you're setting your retention goals and limits. The last little note down here is really just make sure you remain realistic about your goals. If you know you're sitting on a smaller appliance, you can't go and set these things for 90, 180, 160 days. Be realistic. Set them down 30, 45 days. If you need to keep backups longer than 30, 45, 60 days and you don't have space, that's where the cold backup copy targets come in. Get those backups copied off to the cold storage and rotate that cold storage for longer term. Now, when we look at the number of days between synthetic fulls, it is based on these two settings. Max minus min minus 1 is the number of days between synthetic fulls that the system will create for you. By default, when these are set to 0, it's every 14 days by default. Really, when you're setting max and min, the biggest thing to think about is you want to make sure you avoid setting the difference between max and min to less than 8 days, especially if you're running your own weekly fulls. By setting this less than 8 days and running your own weekly fulls, you run the risk of running a synthetic full the same week you run your own full, using more storage, more space. You don't need it. You want to make sure you're taking action to manage your storage. For the UB, you can add additional storage. That's a big advantage. For the recovery series, you cannot add additional storage. They're pre-sized based on the model size, based on your backup capacity. Now, to add additional storage to UB, you add that through the Satori UI, and the only real caveat is that it must be from the same storage array, and you really want to avoid spanning any disk. Multiple points of failure can cause an issue for you later on if you were to lose one of those arrays. Now, if you do run out of room on your recovery series, your physical appliances, you may have to purchase additional appliances or forklift and upgrade those out. Or your last option is to back up less. Decommission servers, add inclusions, exclusions, those types of things you can do to back up less. When we talk about managing performance, boy, the biggest thing to worry about here is encryption can degrade the performance and should be avoided if possible. We talked about it a little bit earlier. You can add encryption at the asset level or the backup copy level. So make sure you're kind of looking at the best possible method to make sure you can encrypt without degrading as much performance as possible. Now we look at instant recovery. It's the quickest way to recover a VM, but it does use system resources that can impact the performance of other jobs. Now, Unitrends recommends using a VM recovery if you do not need to recover that VM immediately. If you're not in a hurry, that VM doesn't really have to be up right now. Just do a normal restore of it. It'll take as long as big as it is, and then power it up from there when you're all done. You're not going to use processor memory off the top of your physical Unitrends appliance or the UB. Now, UB potentially can improve performance and retention by adding additional processors and memory. You have that luxury on the virtual appliances of shutting it down, making sure no backup jobs are running, and giving it more processor and memory. You can do that. You also can split and stagger backups in groups to help improve performance as well, too. If you know you have a bunch of assets that need 6-hour recovery points, don't put them all in one big group. Take those and divide them into halves or thirds and separate them out and run, still every 6 hours, but separate them by 2 or 3 hours around the clock. And you definitely want to make sure you stagger cold backup copy jobs during off-peak backup hours. If you're creating backup jobs going off to cold storage, you don't want those to run during the times that all of your backups run at night. Usually when you schedule cold storage jobs to run off of the appliance, it's during your off-peak backup hours during the day when you're not running a bunch of recovery points in production times. That load for cold copy targets is all on the Unitrends appliance. It doesn't have to go out to your clients and your network and do all this stuff and utilize resources during the day. So it's usually best to run those backup copy targets on off-peak backup hours. Now, you can also tune your backup schedules to optimize your resources. As we mentioned in the previous slide, you can stagger your backup start times of the same assets. You want to use the backup history report to kind of figure out when these things are running, how long do they take, which ones can I break off into different groups to help get the performance down in backup groups as a whole, or for a particular asset that may be taking too long itself. Maybe one asset in a group is taking too long. You want to stagger it and move it all by itself. The backup history report gives you all that detail to see when they started, what other servers ran at the same time, and how long do those servers take when running in groups. So now let's take a look at system and client management. One of the first things we want to kind of point out when we talk about system management is you really want to make sure you're always checking for those alerts to make sure that you are running the newest versions on the appliance and the clients as well, the systems. You want to make sure you apply typical IT maintenance and power cycling routines, every 180 days, even though it's a Linux-based operating system underneath our appliance, every 180 days it has to do a disk checker. Be proactive when you run major upgrades and things like that. Take the time to reboot the box if you need to. Make sure you're checking your dashboard for storage, growth, protected asset counts, and errors. Make sure you're logging in or reading your reports and doing these health checks. Don't just set this thing and forget it. When we look at client management, there's kind of 3 different areas that we want to focus on for you. One is kind of really managing your existing clients. So when we break that down first, you want to make sure you keep your existing system up to date. Keep your agents up to date. Check for those alerts once again. It'll also alert you if a server is down. If you're having connectivity issues to that agent or the virtual host or the NAS, it'll send you alerts in there as well too. Now you also have to focus on adding new servers as you grow. You bring on new physical servers, new workstations, new NASs. You can add those as assets, add them to your schedules, same as we've shown you in all the other modules. Now, VM, SQL, Oracle, Exchange objects, they're discovered nightly on the inventory sync. Once again, we showed you that auto-include in the SQL module and the SQL recovery module. By having the auto-include turned on, you kick your schedule off where it runs tonight. If you've created a new object back there, it's automatically picked up in that default auto-include schedule. One of the biggest things to remember when you're managing all of your clients, you really always want to make sure you're using an agent on any domain controller. It's not a best practice to do a virtual snapshot on any domain controller. I think we've been pretty clear about that one. One of the other things that Unitrends really likes to do to help you manage these clients, to help you manage disaster recovery, is make sure that you're hard coding your IP addresses. It's really recommended for quicker entire site recovery. If I don't have to bring your DNS, your DHCP, your domain controller back first, and I can start recovering everything based off of a host table off the recovery system, that allows me to start recovering everything so much faster. Last thing is make sure you remove any unwanted asset types. If they no longer need to have current backups, you don't need to offer instant recovery, quick recovery on them anymore. They've been decommissioned, whatever. Make sure you remove those assets. Make sure you delete them from the schedules, delete the asset. It will purge those backups as well. So let's take a quick look at the dashboard. Now, our dashboard is customizable, and it provides you a really high-level overview. There's the backup summary, the storage tile, the backup copy targets for hot and cold, and there's also a really cool recovery summary and a little plugin you can add to go to our community. Now, really, it provides you that quick view of asset protection, backup performance, and reliability, storage health, and the recovery status as well, too. All right, when we look at the reports you can run at any time to check the status of your system. The big areas for the reports are backup, recover, backup copy, appliance, and storage. When you look at the backup area, there's a breakdown of the protection summary, backup history, legal hold backups, and backup failures. For recovery reports, we have the recovery history. For backup copy, we have protection summary, backup copy capacity, backup copy hot targets, backup copies past 24 hours, storage footprint report, and backup copy cold targets. For the appliance reports, we have update history, capacity report, load report, and the alert report. And under storage, we have storage and data reduction. When we first start to look at the protection summary, and all the other modules we've been using this, you use this to view all your assets, your local backups, and your backup copies, which ones have protection, which ones don't, which ones have schedules, which ones have manual backups, which ones have current recovery points. A lot of great information in this protection summary report. It can be exported, and it can be customized. In the protection summary, there's the asset section. Once again, you can sort it or filter on the protected by backup copy. You can also filter and sort on any of the names or columns as well, too. You can, over in the corner here, you can click on the column to add or remove any of these columns and information in this report as well, too. You can also view additional lines. You can see on this report, I'm totaling 18 records, and I'm viewing 25. Sometimes you'll go in and it'll say hundreds of records. You may have to view 100 per page. You can navigate between those pages showing those results as well, too. When we look at the backup history, you really want to make sure you're filtering or sorting on the status so you can bring your failures up to the top. If you're trying to troubleshoot, it's a really quick way to get in and look at your current failures. What failures do I have from today, yesterday, this week? Sort them out and look at the statuses and pull out your failures or your warnings, whatever status you're looking for. When we look at the backup history, you can also, once again, filter on the protected asset. So if you know you're looking for your Oracle server, your SQL, your Exchange server, you can start typing in the name of that asset, so it'll show you all the records for that particular asset. You don't have to look at your entire backup history report. Once again, this backup history report, it can be exported, sorted, customized, and you can drill down into each one of these records and get more detail. You can also sort by the start date. Maybe you want to only see a particular date for your backup history log. Maybe you want to see certain sizes for that backup history as well, too. Maybe you know your server's 10 gigs, 15, 20, 30, your database sizes. You want to sort anything that's a certain size. Also on the end date, when did it start and when did it end? May have ran from 11 o'clock at night over across midnight, and maybe 2 different dates in there. You can actually sort or filter on both the start and the end date. You can also filter on the type. This is also a pretty cool one. Maybe you're looking for all your fulls, whether they're synthetic or actuals, or maybe you're looking for just your synthetics or differentials. Whatever backup type we have, you can type that in and you'll filter those records out as well too. Very easy. This is filtered on type and this is sorted on type. Right? They then sorted it on type here. So you can filter it and you can sort based on that type. So maybe you want to bring all your fulls to the top and synthetics towards the bottom. You can do that kind of stuff too as well. You want to use that to sort the group instead of filter on it. You can bring the fulls to the top and look at your particular backups in a certain order if you want to sort that same type as well. We do have legal hold backups as well. You can run a report that'll show you any backup that is legal hold. Very important. If you put anything in legal hold, realize it will affect your retention on other systems. This is a great report to tell you what's in legal hold right away, so you can go and remove it or just keep an eye on it as well if you need to. You want to monitor the expiration dates for the upcoming purge dates. Some holds need to be removed when they're no longer needed. If you put a legal hold in never, it's never going to purge on its own, and that can affect your storage. So if you have something that's never, make sure you remove it if your legal hold requirement has gone away so it does not affect the rest of your backup retention. There's also the backup failures report. Once again, it can be customized, sorted, filtered, and you can drill down into these details. If you need to look at exactly why something failed, you're going to run your backup failure report and go into the details. It gives you log references, tells you exactly what the error message or the failure message is on why this backup failed in these details in the backup failures report. You can sort it by the end time to view the newest failures first. If you ran a backup manually now, it failed, come in here and sort it by the end time, and it should be right at the top for you. You can also isolate issues and click on more details, as I mentioned. It'll pull up the record and show you if there's any log, references. It'll give you exactly what the issues are in here so you can, resolve your issues. You can also share that information with Unitrends support. There's also the recovery history. As you start to run through audits and tests and actually put stuff back and recover stuff, you'll have a great history here of all the different types of recovery that you've done over your system as well, too. We tried to show you these recovery reports in each module as we started to restore each of our databases and our assets and the different types of restores that we did. So we've seen this recovery history report quite a few times. You can filter on the status to see any failure details. If you do have a restore that fails on you, you may need to go in and see why that restore failed. You can drill down into these records for more detail. There's also the backup copy capacity report. It tells you what is sitting on your hot target and how big those assets are. It's a great way to kind of figure out how much am I replicating and keeping on that hot copy target. How big does my hot copy target need to be? You can see, once again, you can also sort this stuff by size. You just really want to validate and make sure that it is the correct used data set size for that particular asset. Is my web server really 244 gigs? Is my file server really 1 terabyte? There's also the backup copy hot targets report. This tells me a list of all the assets that have been copied from my local source to my hot target, and I can filter on the status of each of these, once again, to see those details. Do I have any failures in here that I need to address or look at? I can customize, sort, export, and drill down into this report for more details. Now, you'll also get an email every day with your replication activity. This is the backup copy past 24 hours report. All right, these are all the details. You'll see if you have failures, successes, how long they took, how big they are, the number of files that were transmitted. Great little summary that comes to you in your email for all of your backup copy past 24-hour history. Make sure you look for any failures in this report. Make sure you address those failures right away. If you leave backup copy jobs unattended, you're running the risk of not having any disaster recovery or long-term retention if you need it. There's also the Appliance Update History Report. This report is great to show when you ran the last upgrades. When did you upgrade your appliance? You can see I upgraded my appliance on October 14th, October 22nd, October 29th, all of that history, and you can see the versions that I upgraded to when I ran those upgrades. Once again, you can sort these by the date. That way you can see the order of your updates and also the end version too as well. That way you can see the order of what versions you went to. Check and make sure you're running the newest version, and make sure you check to see if you have any failures for those updates as well too. Make sure the updates are all successful. There's also the capacity report, probably one of my favorites. One of the reasons I really like this report is because it's native numbers. It's your newest full for all of your assets before deduplication and before compression. You really want to make sure you're verifying that your assets are the correct size. Sort them if you need to, right? Is my media server really 1.8 terabytes? My file server 200 gigs? My laptop's 179 gigs? You should have some idea of how big your assets are. And here, when you sort it, you can see the assets that are the largest at the top right away. It's really kind of cool. If you see you have an asset with 0, then there is no full for that asset, which means it cannot be recovered. If you see a data set size in there, that means you have at least one full. Once again, this is the newest full before deduplication and before compression. These are native numbers. You can see my total space used here is 2.8 terabytes. There's also the load report. All right, the load report kind of shows you the load on the appliance. You can customize it by a date range. If you think your appliance is running low on resources, this is a great report to go and check out to see how your appliance is doing as far as resources. If you see excessive load on a target, it can cause replication to suspend or time out. So if you see a target that's running in the high yellow, high reds, every couple of days it seems to suspend your replication or times it out, you may need to add more processor memory to that virtual appliance or think about getting a bigger physical appliance or replicating less or creating less backup copy jobs. Now, if it's constantly running in red or yellow, once again, that should raise concern. You're going to have to address that, whether more memory or a bigger appliance. Now, the alerts report is pretty cool because you can view alerts across time and you can filter unresolved issues and look at them from their high severity as well, too. All right, so if you see anything that is not resolved yet, then you still need to take a look at it. If there's agents that need to be updated, clients are no longer online, things like that, they will still show up until that issue has been fixed. Now, one reason I really like the alerts report is when you clear them off the dashboard from the viewable alerts area in the dashboard, they still stay in this report with their status and their history. So in the new Satori interface, you can go back and look at past alerts that you've had even after you've cleared them off the dashboard. The storage report's pretty cool. It actually gives you a breakdown of the used storage every day, and it really helps you determine any anomalies that might be there based on scheduled backups and the used storage that you're going through every day. If you see big spikes or growth around certain times of the last 30 days, then you can kind of pay attention to those spikes and growth. Maybe you can start to see patterns based on your storage history. These reports are customizable and exported. You just want to make sure this is one of the reports that you want to make sure you're exporting every once in a while to keep that history. There's also the data reduction report. You can customize this by a date range. It goes back and looks usually through like the last 30 days, usually what I recommend you set it as. And you're really just going to make sure you pay attention to any deduplication and compression ratio differences. Where are the spikes? Make sure it's not flatlined either. Make sure that your deduplication green bar is not totally at the bottom and deduplication is turned off. You're just really going to make sure you're seeing a data reduction happen, and you're going to see high peaks around the times you run your own multiple masters. If every week you run new masters on every one of your assets, about every 7 days you'll see a spike of deduplication in your appliance here. All right, so it's pretty cool to be able to see those spikes when you run back-to-back masters or weekly masters on your schedule. If you run incremental forever on everything you have, you won't see spikes in your deduplication. You'll see deduplication hitting on a trend, but it won't be spikes like this like you see on the screen now. There's also the devices report, and I really like the devices report because I showed you the capacity report in the Satori interface earlier. Remember that capacity report is before deduplication, before compression, so those are your native numbers. And in the legacy UI, if you want to run the devices report, it actually shows you the size of the backup after deduplication, after compression, which is really cool to be able to see what the Unitrends appliance is really seeing for each of those backups on the disk. Once again, in the legacy interface, you can still customize and sort and export and drill into these records in the legacy report for the devices. It shows each backup true use space after deduplication and after compression on the storage device, what the backup is actually using for storage after deduplication and after compression. Now, the old policies report that's in the legacy UI, I really like the detail in the old policies report, so I wanted to make sure I showed it to you. But the details are in the new protection summary. But the policies report in the legacy interface is a much cleaner report that maybe you want to think about exporting this based on major changes, and after you implement your box, just keep a copy of this around every once in a while until maybe they get this report into the Satori interface. It's a much cleaner version of each asset that has a schedule, what backup types are running against that asset, and the schedule name and details. It's very useful for auditing and compliance. It's for scheduled assets. And once again, it shows that backup type, the frequency, the job details, whether you have includes or excludes on your file level assets too. Great detail in this report, and it's not in the Satori UI yet. Some of this information is in the protection summary, as I mentioned. You just have to learn how to read that report and get this same information out of it. It's not organized in one big table like this anymore. And once again, as I mentioned, you want to make sure you export this report kind of monthly or before and after any major configuration changes to your Unitrends system, so you have a record of how your assets are configured and scheduled for backup jobs. Very valuable report here. Now, a few reporting best practices. One of the biggest ones is that the backup report data, when you go and run these reports and you view them and you're looking at the data in those reports, that data is purged and removed from the system when the backups are purged and removed. So depending on your business requirements, you may want to go in and utilize the API, the UI, or export these reports to keep track of historical data. If you want to keep track of your capacity, your backup history, the cold and hot target jobs, then you want to make sure you're exporting these things every 30 days, every 45 days, every 60 days. If you only have 30 days of retention, make sure you're doing them every 30 days. Because once those backups purge off the appliance, we cannot report on the history of those backups anymore. There's also a nice little chart here in the ongoing administration module with a breakdown of each one of these reports. I'm not going to leave these lists for you, but in this module, you'll see which reports that you can customize the date ranges, which ones are exportable, which ones you can sort and customize, and which ones you can drill down into for more detail. You can see there's a lot of reports in the new UI, and there's a few reports that you have to still get to through the legacy interface. Reports are available in the legacy interface, once again, for that devices and the policies report. Those are really the only two reports that you have to go back to the legacy interface to still get. Next, let's watch the how-to video tutorial and take a look at running and viewing reports and configuring alerts.